here's the format for today's event, the agenda. After some brief housekeeping here, we're going to be introducing the two candidates and finding out a bit about them. And then we'll have a Q&A session for both candidates. The two of them are in nearby areas, and so they're often on joint events. So I think you'll be enjoying hearing them answer questions for issues that are relevant to both of them, and also some that are specific. We'll also be, after that session is finished, and I should mention, if you have questions for the candidates, please go ahead and I think at this point put them into the chat, and we'll keep tabs on those and answer them if we have time. And we've allowed a good amount of time for that. Then we'll have someone from Peggy from the Blue Voter Guide, and she's going to be talking about all of those propositions. Well, not all of them, but three of the key ones today out of the 10 propositions that we have to look at today. A little time for questions on that, and then a wrap up. So we're ready to get started, but two things. First, let me add that November is now, especially for overseas voters. And if you haven't done so, be sure to register to vote, and for more information, you can go to votefromabroad.org. And you'll also find there links for live voter assistance. And there's many different ways that you can get that help that you need, but do remember that ballots will be appearing on this weekend from the 21st if you've already registered. So worth making sure that you're all ready to go. Now I'd like to introduce you to a special guest, Democrats Abroad International Chair, Martha McDevitt Pugh. Martha lives in the Netherlands and she votes in California, as she said in the box. She led the Democrats Abroad delegation at the exciting Democratic Convention in Chicago, National Convention in Chicago last month. Martha.
Thank you so much, Inga, and thank you to the California State team for organizing this wonderful event today. As Inga said, I'm Martha McDevitt Pugh, International Chair, Democrats Abroad, and I've been a lifelong California voter. So I'm delighted that we get to bring candidates to you for some really important House races today, and really glad that folks are here in person as well as on our live stream. This election is so important, and while there's so much attention right now on our wonderful presidential candidate, who of course is also a California, is also from California, and like me, from Oakland. There are some really critical races in California that can determine whether Democrats win back the House, which of course we will do and we must do. So I'm really delighted that we're not only bringing to you a couple of important candidates today, but also that we're going to look into some of those ballot propositions, which are so important. So welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. If you haven't requested a ballot yet, you should do that. And if you haven't checked to see whether your registration is on file, you could also do that. It's always really good to be in contact with your local election officials, so I really encourage folks to do that. And we will be getting ballots soon. I haven't gotten mine yet, but I've heard that some California voters who've requested to get their ballots by email have already gotten those. And so this is a really perfect time to bring to you some important information and candidates from California. So I will just thank you for being here today, and I will hand over back to our hostess, Inga. So please take it away and introduce our candidates.
Thank you very much, Martha. Yes, so for those of you who are joining us the first time, the California State Team is one of several state teams in Democrats Abroad. Our mission, as you might guess, is to get as many overseas Californians as possible voting for Democrats in the election. And we have, of course, our fellow Californian, as Martha mentioned, Kamala Harris, and that has sent our energy levels skywards. But we cannot be complacent. Every vote everywhere in California is going to matter, perhaps especially in these 6 and perhaps even more swing districts that could easily go one way or the other. And that will affect what's going to happen in Congress. We're going to be hearing today from 2 of the state's most exciting congressional candidates who are gearing up to win and make Congress firmly blue. So just one thing to remember, wherever you vote in the state, your vote is important. Our state has 58 counties, and that means different local election officials. So go again to votefromabroad.org if you haven't sorted that out. And if you are already registered, as Martha mentioned, you'll be receiving your ballot. And we'll have a little information in the box about faxing your ballot back, which is a very good way to return your ballot back. So now I want to introduce my co-lead from the California State team, Judith Bolker, and she will introduce our first candidate, Adam Gray. Again, if you have any questions for either of our candidates as we go along, please type it into the chat. Judith?
All right, thank you, Inga. So before I introduce our two candidates, I want to introduce you to the California Central Valley. It covers about 20,000 square miles and is one of the more notable geographical depressions, it's a valley, in the world, occupying a central position in California, and thus the name Central Valley. It has many small rural towns whose main employers are big oil, big agriculture, and prisons. Without the hardworking people there, we would not have food on our tables. And this area is actually a breadbasket, not just for California, not just for the United States, but for the whole world. The residents are predominantly young, Hispanic, speak Spanish at home, and have limited healthcare services and access to quality education. The child poverty rate is double the national average. There are threats to clean air and water, and they are daily issues. Housing affordability is one of the big issues in the California Central Valley as well. This breadbasket for the U.S. is at the forefront of environmental, racial, and economic justice issues. The good people living in the valley deserve these two people, Adam Gray and Rudy Salas, to be elected to represent them. So I am really pleased to introduce you today to Adam Gray. I really like Adam Gray. I've spent quite a bit of time with him. I've been really lucky. He's a native son in the Valley, born and raised in Merced, so he understands firsthand the problems facing the Central Valley. As a California Assembly member, Adam fought against the state water grab, increased the funding for public safety, wrote the bill to suspend the gas tax, and paved the way for rural healthcare expansion at UC Merced. His strong record is why members of the law enforcement community and Republicans alike support Adam in his fight to keep the community safe. As the Democratic nominee for Congress in CA 13 in 2022, Adam came within 564 votes of beating extremist John Duarte, one of the closest margins in the whole country. And I know he's going to finish the job in 2022. So, Adam.
Well, thank you, Judith. Can you hear me okay?
Sure can.
Excellent. Well, appreciate all of you taking the time to be with me today on Zoom and all the efforts that you're putting into this campaign. We couldn't do this without all the volunteer help, and you all have been amazing in your respective roles across the state, across the country, and across the world. My name's Adam Gray. I'm running for California's 13th Congressional District. As Judith said, I ran in 2022 and was involved in the closest race, second closest race in the country, 564 votes. And we're back at it in 2024, hoping for a much better turnout here in CD 13. We had a historic 30-year low in voter participation. And just to illustrate that more clearly, in 2020 in this district, 250,000 people voted. In 2022, 130,000 people voted. So nearly half of the voters didn't show up. And of that half that didn't show up, about 70% of them are Democrats and independents. So you can see there's a lot of gains to be made if we make voter contact and we turn up the volume on this election and get people out. It really is, even though it's in a conservative part of California, it's a conservative Democratic district, not a conservative Republican district, and has been so. In fact, the last Republican congressman before John Duarte was a guy named Leroy Johnson in 1957, just to give you an idea of how long Democrats have represented my home county. I served 10 years in the state legislature, developed a reputation for bipartisan problem solving. I was the founder of the California Problem Solvers Caucus. I was the chairman of the New Dems. And in fact, my colleague Rudy Salas was also a chair of the New Dems, and we worked together quite a bit in the legislature trying to steer a course where folks could work together and get along. And really, that's been the theme of our campaign, is sending a message to Congress that they need to stop acting like school children, elbowing each other in the nation's capital and starting fistfights and using divisive rhetoric, and actually get to work solving problems. You know, here in the Valley, which is the largest agricultural valley in the world, I always like to emphasize that with people because it's too often overlooked. We are the best at farming in the entire world and on the largest scale. And I grew up in the dairy industry, and many families and many individuals around here grew up involved in agriculture and farming, and that's something that's extraordinarily important to the area. So we need people in Congress that are going to work just as hard as the people do here in the Valley to really get together and solve problems and quit with the divisive, childlike behavior. So that's why I'm running for Congress, and really appreciate all the help we've received. This is, you know, there isn't a path to the majority that doesn't include this congressional district. That's how pivotal it is to the outlook in Washington. And I can tell you that, you know, we've got dozens of volunteers. We had, in fact, 250 people this weekend out walking door to door with me. And we've been doing that every weekend for 6 months, in addition to raising a substantial amount of money. The last time I ran for Congress, I raised $2.5 million. We're currently over $4 million and on pace to hit $5 million by the end of the campaign. So really excited about the opportunities to communicate our message to voters, and appreciative of all the help I've received, be it postcards, phone calls, door to door, knocking and talking with voters. It's just been an incredible outpouring of support, and we're super grateful for that, and happy to answer any questions people might have about the district, and just very appreciative of the opportunity to visit with you.
Beautiful. Thank you very much, Adam. And we will get to questions, but first we're going to introduce your good friend, Rudy Salas, and neighbor in the CD 22. So is Rudy here?
I am.
Beautiful. Good. Yeah, good to see you again.
Hi,
So,
Judith.
Rudy was born and raised in the Central Valley and grew up working in the fields with his dad before the sun rose. As the first Latino Bakersfield City Council member in its 112-year history, and that blows my mind that it took 112 years. And later as a California Assembly member, Rudy has fought for the values of hardworking families in his community, from protecting a woman's right to make her own healthcare decisions and winning overtime pay for farm workers, to lowering the price of prescription medication and voting against the gas tax. Rudy has always stood up for the Central Valley, and he will do the same in Washington. So Rudy was the Democratic nominee for Congress in CA 22 that's a lot of twos, in 2022, coming just within 3,000 votes of unseating David Valadero, an enabler of his party's worst impulses, who speaks like a moderate but votes like an extremist. So we're really happy to have Rudy here, and please tell us about your platform and what your plans are.
All right. Thank you, Judith. I appreciate that. Thank you for the intro. And thank you all for being on the Zoom. You know, I know my good friend Adam Gray was on right now. I'm about 5 hours south of Adam, still in the San Joaquin Valley. You know, I tell people I'm running and grew up in the home of Cesar Chavez and Dolores Huerta and kind of that entire movement. And so I know you talked about, Judith, me being the first Latino on the Bakersfield City Council in 112 years, but believe it or not, there's never been a Latino Congress member in the entire history of the United States from the San Joaquin Valley. And so, you know, this large swath of inland California has never had that type of representation. So I'm happy to try to break that barrier once again, but we'll need your help to do that. I did run last cycle. Like Adam said, it was just a historically low turnout, 34% turnout. I tell people when a little over 3 out of 10 people are voting, it's kind of hard to get across the finish line. But, if we get turnout up, which we've been working hard at every single day, then we get this across the finish line. I tell people my job is to do in Congress what I did at the state legislature, which is, my state seat was held by 2 Republicans before me. And then we took that away, and now it's solidly in the Democratic column. And so we got to do that now in Congress. Take this away from the other side, take it off the table, and win this seat. But we got to get there. And so we've started earlier than we've ever started. We've actually been at this since last year. When you look at the totals that our volunteers and just our team has put together, we've done over 1 million phone calls into the district now with all of our partners and everybody on the ground. We've done over 100,000 door knocks, which is fantastic. And yeah, we're raising good money, but I tell folks, what's crazy about this seat and a lot of our battleground seats is that the other side and the super PACs and IEs on the other side just pour so much money into these races. I tell folks that's the new form of voter suppression on the other side, is they throw so much money in here to confuse voters that they want voters to be like, well, I don't know, and not vote. And we know that benefits the other party and not our party. We're trying to encourage more and more people to vote. I believe democracy is stronger when we have more people participating and voting. And so I appreciate all of you, no matter where you're at around the world. If you live in our districts and are eligible to vote, that you should be voting, and appreciate that you care enough to still be involved and connected back to the districts. And so just appreciate all of that. We're working really hard. Some of the big issues that people continue to keep talking to us about is costs, about everything, healthcare, choice, and immigration. Continue to be main topics that we continue to hear on the phones, at the doors. And so just appreciative of everyone, what you're doing. Phone calls help, especially if you're out of the area, door knocking if you are, postcards. I mean, all of that makes the difference. And that's what's going to be the difference when you have these races that are decided by a handful of votes in every neighborhood. That's going to be the decision maker, not only in these battleground seats between me and Adam, but even who's going to control the House of Representatives. And we know whoever controls that speaker's gavel controls so much of the agenda, not just in our districts, but across the country and around the world. And so more than anything, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being involved. Thank you for helping. I tell people if we do a little more, then we worry a little bit less. And so I tell folks just do a little bit more. That could mean one more phone call, one more postcard, one more door knock, one more donation, like whatever that little bit more is, then we can rest a little bit easier come November 5th. And so thank you very much. Happy to answer any questions as well.
Fabulous. Thank you very much. And we'd like to bring Adam in now, and we're going to ask some questions. So spotlighting Adam. In the meantime, voting from abroad, we do phone bank, but what we do here is call people all over the world and make sure they know how to register to vote and make sure that they can vote. And we also postcard and send letters, again, reminding people that they can vote from abroad and helping them to be able to do it. And Democrats abroad are known as the margin of victory. So the people who are here now on this call from all over the world, the global YouTube and Facebook that we're promoting this on can be the margin of victory for both of you. So we're really happy that you're here. So healthcare is an issue in the Valley. It's called a medical desert. And it's hard for working families to find access to even the most basic of healthcare. Medicines, as you know, can be very expensive and hard to find. So I know both of you have taken steps to help improve the healthcare ability in your districts. So Adam, could you talk about that first, what you've done to improve access to healthcare? And then Rudy, if you have some comments, we'd love to hear from you.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. Access to healthcare is a huge issue in the Valley. And I emphasize the word access because too often healthcare is viewed by most voters around the debate and dialogue with coverage, right? Whether we're talking about single payer for all or the Affordable Care Act or Obamacare, there's a lot of dialogue and debate around how we make sure that people are covered. And certainly, Rudy and I have worked collaboratively at the state level to increase coverage in many, many ways. California is really a leader within the country on that front. But the issue that too often gets overlooked is if you live in rural communities like ours, there are no doctors to get to. And let me put this in real numbers. In Merced County, which is my home county, there's 150 doctors for every 100,000 people. In the city and county of San Francisco, there's 500 doctors for every 100,000 people. So in an apples to apples comparison, we don't have nearly the access to doctors that urban communities do. And that is, compounded by a lack of healthcare workforce that involves nurses, nurse practitioners, physician's assistants, having the adequate clinics. There's a hospital in my district that I'm running for that closed in the last 2 years, and that Democrats at the state level have been working to try reopen, but our Republican congressman's done absolutely nothing about it. And so what do we need to do to solve that problem? Well, we have to educate a hell of a lot more healthcare workers, right? And that means getting medical schools and nursing programs expanded in the region. During my 10 years in legislature, when I started in 2012, I was told by all the know-it-alls in Sacramento that there was no chance we were ever going to get a medical school program here in the San Joaquin Valley. I pointed out to them that every medical school in California is conveniently located less than 30 miles from a beach, and they seem to have left the rest of us out to dry. And I stuck with it like a dog on the bone. I worked with Governor Brown, Governor Newsom, and eventually Rudy and I and others were able to secure over $200 million to build the first building of what's going to be a joint medical school program at UC Merced, located here in Merced, California. And beyond that, we work to expand nursing programs and invest in healthcare workforce in so many other ways, and make sure that our community clinics could be open additional hours. So this is a big issue. I know Rudy and I have been side by side on it for the 10 years we spent in the legislature, but there's a lot more work to be done in Congress, like expanding residency slots, which Medicare hasn't expanded in. We need real money and real investment so that healthcare isn't just available for urban communities, because that's not good enough to just have coverage that can be used by Los Angeles, New York, and San Francisco, and leaving the rest of us without care. So thank you for the question. I'll let Rudy add anything he might want to add.
Yeah, no, I think what Adam's saying is completely correct, especially in this district. It's all about access. It's all about trying to get doctors. That's why we've supported things like the Thomas loan repayment program, where we'll pay for medical doctors that serve in underserved areas, and the entire Central Valley is an underserved area. Adam's talking about some of the numbers in terms of primary care physicians. I ran the numbers, and we have over 1 million people in the 3 counties in this district, and 784 primary care doctors. So 784 for over 1 million people. It's actually like 1.2 million people. And so you look at that, access is the hugest thing. That's why we focused on it at the state. It's also lowering the cost of medications, which, we see people travel internationally, right, to get lower prescriptions. And so, we got to do more here in the United States and in these districts where people are reliant on those types of things. The Central Valley is also home to some of the largest diabetic rates around the entire country. So, things that Congress is doing, like capping the price of insulin at $35 is paramount. It means life for so many people here. And so, we did that for seniors, but that needs to be done for every resident. And so, it's focusing on those types of things that make a real difference. And so, not in addition to expanding and creating a medical school in the Central Valley at UC Merced, one of the other things I've always focused on is healthcare professionals and nurses. And so we've done $12 million to our local colleges to graduate more nurses. And, I was at the pinning ceremony where you pin the nurses once they finish, and And the director there is telling me, like, Rudy, half the kids on stage are there because of you. And we're going to graduate, we're going to double the graduating size for the next 10 years because of things that you've been able to do. And so to me, that's what it's about. It's about making sure that not only we have access to folks, but that we're actually growing folks to serve our community, and that we need that. And so medications, expanding the Affordable Care Act, things that need to be done just to save people's lives. And so we'll continue to keep marching forward, doing those things, looking for those opportunities in Congress. But I know one of the things right off the bat for me is making sure that we have that $35 cap for everyone in Congress.
That's great. Great to hear that. And as a nurse, you brought back memories with the pinning ceremony. I was so glad I didn't have a capping ceremony. Anyhow, you guys are doing wonderful work helping to turn a desert into a vibrant healthcare community again. So, Rudy, you mentioned that you may possibly be the first Latino in your district. And what does that mean to you? How would that feel?
Yeah, I tell people it's a double-edged sword. It's crazy that it's taken so long, but it's good to break that barrier. I can tell you when I'm out in the community, in addition to people just talking to me about the issues, but when people talk to me in Spanish, for instance, they're proud of the fact that someone that looks like them is actually, making decisions about them and their lives. And they talk to me more about it in terms of their kids. They want their kids to see that and to know that their kids can make a difference and that they are a part of the community. And they feel that way when they see somebody that looks like them or can speak to them in their native languages. And so, that's how it's kind of received. That's how people talk to me about it. But, I tell folks it's at the end of the day, it's just doing the right thing for people, right? Making sure that people can afford their medicine, making sure that there's opportunities for their kids, making sure that we're doing everything for parents to make sure that they can provide, put food on the table, advance in their jobs, make sure that they have the skills that they need. And so, at the end of the day, I tell people it's about impacting people's lives in a real way. So when you look at the things that me and Adam have done over at the state, it's really like, how can we make a difference in people's lives? So whether it's medicine, whether it's schooling, whether it's job skills, like we're doing those things that people can see and feel and actually know, like, wow, government is working for me this way. So whether we're talking about a child care tax credit, right, or doubling the size of the nursing programs, like things that people actually see. And so there's a lot of opportunity to do that. The infrastructure bill, the CHIPS Act, manufacturing, everything that Congress has passed, like we got to make sure that money is being reinvested, especially in places with, say, double-digit unemployment, where people can actually see that and feel that, or replacing water pipes where, people can't even drink the water out of their own kitchen faucet because it's coming out cloudy or smelly or dirty, has high rates of arsenic or nitrate. Like, we got to do those types of things so that people can see that government can make a real impact in their lives. And I think what it does is it gets people involved. And it continues to get them involved for future elections and say, wow, this is why I vote. This is why I'm involved, because it does make a difference. Look at what they did here.
Yeah, you want a government that you feel is helping you. Yeah, thank you. So Adam, Rudy mentioned water. Water is a big issue in both of your districts. It's been a political football for years in California, particularly in the Valley, where there's whether it's updating aging infrastructure, or where does the water go? Is it going to big ag? Is it going to people who need water to drink? So as a state assembly member, you helped deliver about $3 billion worth of improvements in infrastructure. So what are the long-term issues for California water, and what impact do you hope to make in Congress regarding water in California as a congressional member?
Well, water's just critical to an ag community, as you can imagine. And the reality is, despite what you may have read or what you may have heard, California's grown its water supply by 1% since the 1960s. And in that same period of time, we've doubled our population, more than doubled, actually. And you can't continue to operate off same water. And there are those that would have you believe, oh, well, we just have to do conservation. There's no room for growing our storage. And that's just A, fundamentally untrue, and B, just bad advocacy for our region. What Rudy and I did is we actually got together and organized our region in the legislature to stand firm when they did the last water bond in 2014 to have money for actual water storage. And because of our organization of both Democrats and Republicans in our region, and because it was a 2/3 vote under Governor Brown, we were able to get $3 billion put in for water storage. And as a result of that, there's actually a new reservoir being built in California for the first time in half a century up north of Sacramento. It's called Sites Reservoir. It's an off-stream facility that'll store water from Shasta and then and then be able to move it down. But there's so many more problems. I mean, even with the addition of Sites Reservoir, the Delta remains a serious environmental challenge. And without the ability to move water through the Delta and down into my district and Rudy's district, that remains another serious issue. And so we've got to be kind of all of the above approach when it comes to water. And another issue that we've worked on together is floodplain restoration. And there's an organization, I'm actually wearing the hat right now, River Partners, that does habitat restoration and floodplain restoration. And we have a new state park, the newest state park in the state park system here in the Central Valley in Stanislaus County, Modesto, California, called Dos Rios, that was built out of a floodplain. And floodplains are good because, in a wet year where you have communities flood up and down the valley, you need places to put water, right? And levees work to a degree, but water, you get enough water, it's going to go where it wants to go. And we've seen that up and down the valley. But if you can create these natural floodplains, particularly over places where the underground aquifers need water, then you can both create a public safety element of having somewhere to put the water. You can recharge the groundwater so that farmers can pump it up. And environmentalists love it because it creates habitat restoration all over the valley. And, under California's Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, we're going to have to retire as much as 1 million acres of farmland, a lot of that in Rudy's district and mine. And so we need to have, new uses and new ways to store water. And what we don't need are people like my opponent, John Duarte, in Congress, who say things like, I'm going to vote against the Democrats and their green energy fantasies, right? That kind of, backwards looking, if we don't adapt to climate change and agriculture is going to be in peril. And that's not only going to hurt the bottom line here in the San Joaquin Valley, but for the 2/3 of the country that gets their fresh fruits and vegetables from California, it's going to hurt our country to not have a domestic supply of food. And for those of you who've been told that we can, have backyard gardens in Marin and Sonoma and feed the world, somebody's lying to you, because that's just not how agriculture works and it's not sustainable. So we need a path forward where people are bringing both sides together and not putting false choices in front of us as if we can only be for the environment or farmers. We can actually be for both, and we can work collaboratively towards solutions.
That's great. I love your problem-solving skills, Adam. How about you, Rudy? I know sometimes in the district, I've seen in front of people's homes like a pile of water bottles because you can't drink the water. Can you speak?
In fact, a couple of months ago, I was in a community where their water well went down, and we were doing just that, bringing out emergency showers, making sure that people were fed, and bringing out water bottles because people just couldn't drink any of the water until they had that well up and running. And this happens up and down the entire Central Valley. This one was out in a community just outside of Bakersfield. And, I was in Stratford, Armona doing the same thing, where we're at the elementary school handing out water because it's an issue where people can't even drink it. So that's why I think infrastructure, focusing on a lot of changing out those old pipes. I saw an article talking about how many lead pipes still exist throughout the entire country, and that's something that definitely we need to be doing as Congress, and we need to take the lead on through communities everywhere. But I focus a lot on the safe drinking water, but it's making sure that we have water for all uses. Agriculture is big. It provides jobs. Like Adam was saying, one of the first hearings I had when I was in the state legislature was on water, and it was on groundwater. You know, these last couple of years, we've had these huge atmospheric rivers. In fact, there's been a dormant lake where that started to reappear here in the Central Valley, out in the city of Corcoran. I don't know if you saw the LA Times coverage on that, but you know, we should be capturing all that water. I tell people one of the things that we can do is groundwater storage, which everybody likes because they like it for the habitat, they like it for just the ability to draw on it in the future. And so when I had this hearing, I asked how many groundwater, like where can we do groundwater storage? And the experts were telling me, well, you could actually do it in 50 out of the 58 counties in California. And I was like, great, well, we should be doing that. Because imagine if you have something locally you can draw from and capture water like we had from these atmospheric rivers, soak that up and actually use it as like a savings account. Then you don't have to worry so much about all the other pressures of actually moving that water around when you have something locally. And if you could do something in 50 out of the 58 counties, I think that helps alleviate a lot of the issues. And so so for me, water is just one of these things. It's a way of life. We need it. It's something that we should be focusing on with the infrastructure bill, the Inflation Reduction Act that passed in Congress. We got to make sure that money is those taxpayer dollars are being reinvested in smart ways across the entire country. And some of those ways are right here in California, where we can make sure that it benefits the entire system and has a huge benefit in everybody's daily lives as well.
Thank you both very much. I know just hearing you talk about how you're solving these problems, I know the people in the community in both your districts will really be served by you. I'm now going to hand it over to Inga, who's going to ask you a few questions and take some questions from chat.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much. It's so interesting to hear about all the things that you've been doing, particularly with water, which is an issue pretty much no matter where you are in in the state. And I want to ask you maybe a little bit about that, because one of the things we hear about the Valley is that it does suffer from, air and water pollution as well, which has caused health issues, higher rates of cancer and asthma. So what can be done to help constituents with this issue, particularly now from a federal level when you're in Congress? Are there ways that you're thinking about addressing that?
Rudy, you want me to jump in?
Yeah, I don't know who you want to start first. Go ahead, Adam.
Okay. Well, there's a lot of things that can be done. And, investments, for example, in, renewable energy, clean energy, economy and the biocircular economy, and try to take advantage of some of the natural facilities and ag economics that are here in the Valley. And for example, there's a place in my district, Corrigan, that takes almond waste, so essentially shells and hulls, and heats it to a high temperature. And out of that, they're able to extract an oil that's an additive for farming, for plants. And they're also able to extract a biochar that they can bury in the soil that enriches the soil, but also more importantly, traps the carbon. So it's actually carbon negative. And so there are all kinds of opportunities like that, which serve to be better for the environment, clean up our air. Investments in fuel cell technology, right? So that you can actually, electric trucks are starting to penetrate the consumer market and the passenger car market. But when you're talking about big rigs, so far the technology is much better with fuel cell than it is with electric when it comes to the big rigs. And we have a ton of them here because we're moving all these, fruits, vegetables, et cetera, to port and all over the country for food. So if we can get, some serious investments, and let me give you an example of where party politics isn't the problem, but regional politics is the problem. And I'm going to highlight the cap and trade program. Here in California, we have a cap and trade program that seeks to reduce emissions. And then essentially the money that's taxed on these polluting industries is then redistributed into new clean energy and clean industry investments. But even though the best investments are here in the agricultural valley, like where you get the most carbon reduction per dollar spent is here in the valley. But our colleagues from LA and San Francisco in this democratically controlled state send all the cap and trade money to themselves in LA and San Francisco, and they don't invest it in our region, right? Well, we can't talk out of both sides of our mouth, and too often our solutions are just stick. They go, oh, we got to punish the ag industry, punish the trucking industry. No, we need to actually invest in those industries so that we can get those vehicles that aren't, clean off the road, both clean up the air, reduce, climate change impacts, and continue to have a thriving, ag economy that produces affordable food that we can, enjoy throughout the country. Rudy, I'll turn it over to you after I've complained about LA and San Francisco.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of things that we could do. Adam talked about some of them. One of the programs I've been helping with for such a long time is actually the trade-in, tune-in, tune-up kind of program, because we know that when you look at carbon, for instance, and things that lead to asthma and PM 2.5 out of the air is actually these old polluting cars. And so one of the things that we did is we created with partnership, government, but also a lot of companies in the private sector was like, hey, well, let's incentivize people to fix their cars. But really what we do now is if you have a really old car, you actually qualify to get into a brand new like EV, for instance. And we have them there at these facilities. We do them now at the fairgrounds just because it's so large and it's been so big. And when you look at the dollar for carbon reduction, like it is one of the best programs in the entire country. And so we're looking at things like that. And also taking carbon out of the air is another thing that we're doing all on the west side of the valley. But it's looking for those types of programs that actually do benefit the environment so that we reduce things like asthma, right? And the risk for asthma, we know asthma is irritated by PM10 and PM 2.5. So if you have these programs that do that, then we could do that. And it's finding ways to show that it's mutually beneficial to do the right thing and showing people that it can be done. So whether it's electric trucks that Adam's talking about, or even, one of the other programs we've both been very supportive of is like the Carl Moyer program, for instance, which will change like old ag pumps into like electric, for instance, and doing those types of things. And then utilizing, I don't know, Adam, I'm sure it's the same for you, but we have these huge solar farms now out in the Central Valley. And so I tell people like we can utilize all of that and show and be an example for the rest of the world of showing like how you can do this beneficially and how it actually benefits our community as well.
One more thing I could add to what Rudy just said too, because he brings up the investments in kind of cleaner vehicles, and the poorest people in the state drive the longest distance to work, right?
Mm-hmm.
Our policies oftentimes we'll give a $7,500 tax credit to somebody who lives in Palo Alto and drives 1 mile to work so that they can buy a $100,000 sports car called a Tesla. And then what we ought to be doing is actually disproportionately investing in people that drive the longest distance, right? So if you're somebody who commutes 100 miles to work to and from, the state ought to give you a much bigger tax credit to help you get into an affordable vehicle that you can do that with. And those kinds of like more forward thinking, more targeted policies.
Yeah, that's great. And it seems like that's the whole trick to all of this is thinking in a broader picture way rather than sort of narrow. And on that front, we had a few interesting questions in the chat from Cuthbert that I just wanted to magnify. One was he was wondering about solar cells and windmills, how they're doing in Vallejo. I'm going to mispronounce that and embarrass myself. And
No,
the other
it's my
question.
misspelling. It's the valley.
Okay, I was going to say,
My
you
misspelling.
missed me. That's not an area I know, but I'm in Northern California. And the other question was more specific. He had about some of the motorways and the dangers. And I've driven in the valley, and I remember also driving sort of when Thule fog was happening, and that was pretty exciting. So, are there plans to expand the roads? What are the thoughts about transportation? You talked a bit about cars and helping people do it. But what about the roadways there and the transportation issues? The kind of flip side is solar power as well.
Great. You want me to start this time or?
Sure, that'd be great.
Yeah, so let me start with the beginning part of the question. So solar and windmills and then transportation, because Kern County is kind of seen as the energy county, not just for the entire state, but even the entire western region, because we have kind of above all and above the everything. We have everything. We have wind, we have solar, we have huge solar farms. In fact, even cities down south and throughout the state will actually contract with some of our solar farms so that they can have their portfolio be a certain percentage of renewable. And so I think it's just utilizing and expanding those types of opportunities, especially on land that ultimately ends up getting fallow. Land that can't be used because either there's not the right water or the soil has too much nitrates or heavy metals in it, then we can actually utilize it for things like solar farms. And it's a beneficial, not only for the environment, but for the people that are there and also for the entire grid. And so I think doing things like that, windmills, we still have like out in Tehachapi, for instance. And if you're in the Bay Area, you guys are familiar with the windmills out in the passes to get into the Bay Area. And so I think it's making sure, like, again, like, when the Congress has these taxpayer dollars that we're reinvesting in these types of things that have mutual benefits for everybody, not only the region, but the entire state and the entire grid as well. In terms of transportation, that's a huge thing. So for me, it's like that tune in, tune up kind of program, putting people in electric vehicles, especially people that travel a lot, giving them the incentives to say, like, look, we're going to help you with the down payment and make this real affordable for you. And, it actually helps with things like reducing asthma and the healthcare and air impacts in the Central Valley. So I think it's looking at things like that. Transportation, the electric trucks is another one. We're still building the high-speed rail, which is going through our communities out here in the Central Valley as well. So taking vehicles off the road. Once that gets done, if people are able to commute. One of the things that we always talk about is the Central Valley is we don't have the same mass transportation options as, say, folks in LA or in the Bay Area have a wonderful system in BART. But those are things that we need to look at the Central Valley. And so when you look at when these historic investments are being made across the country, there's an argument for that to be done right here in the Valley and in our backyard in California. When you look at the population and you look at the amount of hours people are spending in cars and the amount of miles that they're driving, we can make those arguments, but we need to make sure that we're at the table. And I know that's why me and Adam are working so hard to do that.
Okay, so Adam, you want to add anything to that? If not, we'll switch over to another line of questions.
I think Rudy did a pretty good, robust job there.
Well done. So the final questions are about voting, are one of our favorite topics. And Rudy, I think it was you who mentioned the historically low turnout that was in the last election. And of course, voting abroad, we have very different challenges. But what are the challenges that people face trying to vote in your district? And what are you doing to increase voter turnout in that area to make people aware that their vote matters? So
Yeah,
starting with Rudy, and I'm sure Adam has views too.
Yeah, when you look at the election results last cycle, I was reading an article that said that less than 10,000 votes across the entire country is the difference between who held the speaker's gavel between the parties. And you look at that and you're like, wow, how many international voters do we have? It's more than 10,000. Like that could have made the difference and made the difference about Congress and the policies that we care about. I had a historically low turnout last time, 34%. Adam had an equally low voter turnout. But, so what do you do, right? Okay, great. We know it's a problem. So what do you do now? Well, you go out and you talk to people. That's why we've started since last year, the earliest we've ever started in this district, actually outreaching to voters. We've knocked on over 100,000 doors already, having those conversations, doing 1 million phone calls into the district. I tell people and I tell my volunteers, like, they have a spiel. I was like, it's not about getting through your spiel at the door. It's about listening. Because when you listen and you hear what voters care about, and every family, every door is going to be a little bit, broadly, they'll care about things like healthcare, but listen specifically to what they're saying. Because if you can make that connection between how government and their representative for this district can be the difference for them on an issue that they care about, then that's how I think how we get them to vote. I tell people all the time, I was like, if you're going to complain about something, make sure you vote. If something bothers you so much, make sure that it's worth 15 minutes of your time to fill out a ballot. Right. So we do that, and that's what we're doing. That's what we're focusing on. And I tell folks, listen to them. If they care about education, talk about my record on education and talk about how, David Valadao, and I'm sure probably Duarte voted to cut Pell Grants, for instance, right? And opportunities for kids, or whether you talk about, especially with women's choice, right? Our opponents are the most extreme ban nationwide in the entire country. And so, they're taking away that freedom from women where, me and Adam are standing up for women to have that choice. For me, it's about connecting the issues that people care about with the policies and with why it's so important to actually go out and vote. And I'll let Adam add on.
Yeah, I mean, I would obviously turnout is the critical issue in both Rudy's district and mine. I mean, on their face, both these districts are Democratic districts. In fact, if you were just looking at registration numbers, you would think that they're safe Democratic seats. But the reality is we have a disproportionate number of people that don't vote in midterm and primary elections, right? And you'll hear every politician you speak to talk about low voter turnout. Every Democratic politician in the entire country, oh, well, low voter turnout. But what Rudy and I are dealing with is systemic and long-term. Like, we can point you to every single election we've ever ran in, and we can point you to the midterms and the primaries and these extraordinarily, it's not uncommon for us to lose to our opponents in a primary election, to the Republican opponent, and then in the general have a blowout in a big turnout, presidential year. And there's a lot that could go into that. I mean, I'm somebody who thinks we actually ought to have a holiday for voting. I think the transition to vote by mail has actually reduced participation, because if you think about the low education voter, maybe the 19 or 20-year-old who's new to voting, they're getting a ballot in the mail and then misplacing it in a pile of something and then never getting back to it is normal behavior for many 19-year-olds, right? Whereas, like, focusing people on going to the polls on an election day holiday and amping up and turning up the volume around an election. I mean, the reason presidential elections get such high turnout is because everything's on TV all the time, 24 hours a day on every station, talking about the presidency, talking about these things. And it just really acclimates people to, oh yeah, this is the year I vote. We also moved our primary here in California to March, which is extraordinarily far, far away from the November election. I think that's a mistake. If everybody let me wave a magic wand, I'd probably get rid of primary elections and just have general elections, and I align them all with presidentials and have a real focus on getting people to the polls. But having said all that, if we get people to the polls, we're going to win. And the work that you all are doing and the work that many other people are doing, whether it's a postcard writing campaign, phone calls, door to door, and then just the natural media attention that occurs because it's a presidential election is going to generate big turnout. And if we get big turnout, Rudy and I have the record on the issues to win these districts, and we will. So that's kind of where I'm at on those issues. I could talk forever about that, so I'll stop.
But we appreciate a lot of these creative ideas. Now, being overseas voters, we of course have to vote in the state of California. We have to vote either by post, or we have to by mail, or we have to vote by fax. So we're a bit stuck like that, even though I do like your idea very much about a holiday. So one of the biggest problems we face as US citizens overseas is the lack of knowledge about us and the problems that we face, which includes the pure logistics of voting, as well as tax issues. So I wonder if you have any thoughts about your constituents living abroad. How do you plan to learn about our issues and concerns? Because we are, as you've heard, the margin of victory, and we do have our own issues, voting, taxes, many other things. So your thoughts about that? I don't know who wants to start.
You want to start this time, Adam?
Yeah, give me the question again. I want to understand the context there. So you're saying for overseas voters, what issues are we focused on? Or,
Yeah, well, it's sort of a lot of people don't understand that we do have our own issues as overseas voters. I mean, we vote in the United States, but we do have our own issues just about the fact of voting, which is quite difficult when you live all over the globe, but also about some of the tax issues we have because, as you may know, the US and Eritrea are the only two countries that have double taxation. That's one of our big issues. So what I guess I'm asking is if you are going to be able to represent us, if you plan to know a bit more about us. And I should mention that in Congress, there is an Americans Abroad caucus. So I hope very much when you get to Congress, you'll also consider joining that caucus.
yeah, I've spoken to a few Americans abroad groups, and so I'm familiar with some of the specific issues over the years that are of concern to those voters. I actually don't know, and as a result of this Zoom call, I'm going to go find out how many voters we have in this district that are abroad to get a sense of that constituency and maybe think of some creative ways to interact on their issues with them more specifically. But I'd love to participate in the caucus and certainly engage. I know I've talked with folks where healthcare can be an issue when you're abroad as to how the Medicare and other things operate. And so would certainly love to be helpful in that area. Not sure how big of the constituency is in my district, but am going to find out and would love to, even if it's not a huge constituency, engage with Rudy and others and being part of the caucus and seeing if we can make some contributions. I assume you guys don't like being double taxed, but
Good assumption.
Not so much, no.
I'm just going to go out on a limb and say that I think I'm against double taxation. I'm just going to go ahead and stake out that bold position.
Fantastic. Great. Well, I'll hand over to Judith now, but it's very interesting. And we will send you more information a bit about our issues because it sounds like it would be something more you can learn about this unique population of Americans who vote all over the country. Judith?
All right. So I really, for heartfelt thanks to both of you for spending so much time with us at the very busiest time of your year here as we get ready for Get Out the Vote. So thank you both for joining us, and we'll do everything we can to make sure you get the vote from abroad. All right.
All right. Thank you, guys.
Thanks so much. Take care.
Thank you.
So we're not only concerned about congressional races, we also have some propositions on the ballot. And we're fortunate today to have someone who has researched the propositions for the Blue Voter Guide. So Peggy Bernardi is here to talk us through three of the most contentious propositions, 5, 34, and 36. Peggy is a major activist in Yolo County, which is the biggest city is Davis, home of UC Davis. She is a lawyer who worked with the California Department of Water Resources. And as you heard from Rudy and Adam, California's water resources, big issue. Peggy is here tonight or today, depending on where you live, to discuss three of the many propositions on the ballot. So it's going to focus on 5, 34, and 36. And at our next event, October 16th, George Whitesides, David Min, and Derek Tran, Peggy is going to discuss a few of the other top propositions. So Peggy, please.
Thanks, Judith, and thanks to all of you for showing up and sticking with your civic engagement duties while you are in another country. We really appreciate it and understand the significance of the Dems Abroad caucus and the need for your participation. This is welcome to California and our wonderful or horrible proposition system, however you feel about it. I'm going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And as usual, we have them all on the ballot this year. First, I'll talk about 5, and then I'll talk about 36 and 34. So that's a little bit out of order. but I'll introduce you to Proposition 5, which is the good proposition. Majority Leader Cecilia Aguiar Curry introduced this and has been promoting it. What it will do is it will reduce from 2/3 vote required for local bond approval to 55%, only for certain kinds of projects, housing projects, and public infrastructure, both of which are, especially public infrastructure, is a fairly large set of activities that a local government might do: roads, schools, libraries, parks, things like that. And so it's been endorsed by a very wide segment of organizations, California Democrats and many local clubs, labor unions, California Federation of Labor Unions, SEIU, California Nurses Association, League of California Cities, and then two kind of significant business interests, the Middle Class Taxpayers Association and the Small Business Forward Organization. So it's getting, approval and endorsement from more moderate or progressive business interests. And of course, the opposition is the usual, Republicans against taxes type of thing. So this is an important answer going back to 1978 with the old Proposition 13, which you may remember really devastated local financing. And it's just a small tweak to it, but should really help to get to that 55% threshold. So going to the bad, that would be Proposition 36. And you may remember Proposition 47 a few years ago reduced the threshold for theft. How much do you steal and it becomes a felony, from $500 to $950. And of course, this threshold amount hadn't been changed for, 40 years or something. So $1 stealing something that's worth $500 versus $950 is quite different now compared to 1960. So it was kind of a reasonable thing, and it did do a lot to reduce the incarceration rates and the problems with the massively growing prison population in California, associated expenses and problems with that. And of course, you may remember the smash and grab news that came on, got a lot of attention nationally, where a group of people would run into Nordstrom's and steal everything in sight. And so this Proposition 36 is a misguided response to that problem. It reverses the threshold that puts it back to 500 compared to 950. It changes that to a felony. It increases the felony sentences and mandates prison sentences for many instances, as well as criminalizes and makes a felony mere possession of a drug, an illegal drug. And that was also part of criminal justice reform in California. And so the legislature just actually did pass a bill addressing the smash and grab situation. So defining that as sort of a large scale theft operation, they passed a law that would make a felony possible under those circumstances, which I think is a very carefully, intelligently tailored response to that problem, rather than Proposition 36, which basically says, let's go back to the way it was before, which causes the huge prison population increase. And, California was under federal control of the prisons and orders, and a lot of very, very serious litigation where judges were ordering California to release prisoners. And it was an unsustainable situation, which, was partially fixed by 47, has now been further tweaked by recent legislative action, and we don't need Proposition 36 to fix it. So that's the bad. We had Prop 5 is good, Prop 36 is bad, and Prop 34 is the truly ugly, which under Prop 34, it's been called the Revenge Initiative. It's been called a cheap political gamesmanship, and it does represent the worst that can come out of the California proposition system and initiative system. Basically, it's very complicated. when you try to really work through the whole thing. But when you see it as what it's really happening is it's a revenge initiative funded by corporate landlords and billionaires through the California Apartment Association, aimed solely at one nonprofit organization that has a lot of activity in Los Angeles, I believe. I'm from Northern California, so I don't quite understand the local politics of this. But there's the AIDS Healthcare Foundation, which not only has had, many decades of serving the impacted AIDS population, but they also have started housing initiatives to help house people. And in the course of doing that, they have not been perfect. They have received a number of penalties and fines for not maintaining their properties well. And so, but they also came out in support of a different proposition, which supports the ability of local governments to impose rent control. And of course, California Apartment Association is above all else against local rent control. And so when they saw that the AIDS Healthcare Foundation was supporting that ballot initiative, they decided to target the AIDS Healthcare Foundation with an initiative that is aimed solely at this one organization. And we know that because the requirements in this new Proposition 34, you have to report and you have to do this and that, and the government has to take control of you. You lose your tax exempt status if you don't do things right. It only applies to certain organizations, and there's only one in California that meets the definition. They have to participate in a federal drug discount program. They have to have or ever had a license in California to operate as a health plan, pharmacy, or clinic, or had contracts with Medi-Cal or Medicare, has a 10-year period where it spent more than $100 million on purposes other than direct patient care, and owns and operates multifamily housing units with at least 500 violations in their housing with a severity level of high. The only organization that meets that requirement is the AIDS Healthcare Foundation. And so many newspapers and organizations, including Consumer Watchdog and almost all of the newspapers, San Francisco Chronicle, LA Times, and a bunch of others have come out strongly in opposition to Proposition 34, which is the ugly proposition on the California ballot. It is a revenge initiative, and a lot of organizations are opposed to it. There's one thing I'll just full disclosure, the California Democrats have taken a neutral position on this. I don't understand why, but we do not have the California Democrats as an endorsing organization on this, on a no on Prop 34, although there are many other good organizations in opposition to it. And I think that's all I have to say about these, the good, the bad, and the ugly on the California ballot this year.
What would Clint Eastwood say? So, Peggy, thank you. So, if I understand you correctly, you are recommending a yes on 3, but that was 3?
A yes on 5.
5, a no on 34 and 36. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you very much. Really, really helpful commentary. Now I am pleased to introduce you to Holiday Adair, who is working with the Blue Voter Guide. And it's, when you're living abroad and you haven't been back to the state for a long time, it is really hard to know about some of the down ballot races. Now, there are a couple other ways that you can learn about the down ballot races, and Inga is putting that information in chat for you. But the Blue Voter Guide has been at this for a while and has a really great process. So Holiday, if you could explain a little bit about the Blue Voter Guide and how it works.
Certainly, and thank you for having me. I'm much inspired by this group as well as the speakers. And I really want to extend a great thank you for the hard work that Peggy Bernardi has done with us to get all of that information about pretty much all of the ballot initiatives across the state of California. And that is not easy work. What I want to do is show you a brief video because this video can best explain the nature and the process of Blue Voter Guide. So if you'll give me a second to find that video. Not exactly sure if it's going. Do you see the video?
Yep.
Okay, let me start it and see if the sound works.
Worried about this November? Here's a secret that's going to help us knock it out of the park. It's bluevoterguide.org. And unlike other guides, it's laser focused on turning out blue voters by giving them a leg up to make quick, smart, pro-democracy ballot choices. Blue Voter Guide is comprehensive, it's partisan, and here's the secret sauce: endorsements. Blue Voter Guide unleashes the power of progressive endorsers to give voters a quick picture of who supports every candidate, measure, and judge on their ballot. Registered voters get a whole bunch of campaign literature, but it's all candidate specific. None of it helps voters feel more informed up and down ballot. With Blue Voter Guide, a voter enters their address and sees what's on their whole ballot: candidates, measures, judges, accompanied by a list of trusted progressive endorsers for each, an x-ray of who supports whom. This allows rapid, confident blue choices in minutes instead of hours. The results can be printed, saved, and shared. Here's why this matters. Lots of people have trouble voting. Young and first-time voters, people who only vote once in a while, people who wait until the last minute. Over a quarter of young people didn't vote because they didn't know how to evaluate the candidates. Here's young people who needed help telling real news from fake news. John Duarte of the Harvard Kennedy School has been studying young people since the year 2000. Here's what he said in 2023. Gen Z voters want to be perfect and have all their homework done, or else they will leave a ballot item blank. Sister District found that a 2-point increase in down-ballot voting could flip 14 different state legislatures. Blue Voter Guide is here to help. How? Endorsers voters recognize. Here's a local race in 2022. Voters may have never heard of these candidates, but their local Democratic clubs have, and so has their local newspaper. Blue Voter Guide has researched hundreds of endorsing organizations in all 50 states. Each of these organizations has researched and examined the candidates, judges, and ballot measures. If you want to know more about an endorser, just click on them. Everyone needs bluevoterguide.org. In its very first year, Blue Voter Guide helped 75,000 people to vote. Their verdict? They love it. Of users sampled, 9 out of 10 said Blue Voter Guide made it easier to vote, including 3 out of 10 who said it helped them vote in a race they otherwise would have skipped. So, how can we get Blue Voter Guide?
Oh, Ed, yeah.
I stopped because it was not as much useful information. I'm hoping that the video showed you the philosophy behind Blue Voter Guide, in that endorsing organizations that you already trust for being democratic, progressive, forward-thinking have already vetted the candidates that are going to be on your ballot, both from the Democratic Party as well as nonpartisan races, as well as ballot measures, which Peggy's team has been very valuable in finding that information for you. And so we do try to go down as far down ballot as possible. All the person has to do is enter their address. It will generate a ballot. You can then make your selections, save what you have selected to print it out, to save it to the internet, and you'll get a unique URL that you can send to others. My sister lives in California, and she is always asking me how to vote. And so I basically fill out her ballot and send it to her and say, here's your vote. And so I'm hoping that you'll find it useful as you make your selections when you vote this year.
Fabulous. I appreciate that. Okay. And now back to Inga.
I see actually we have a question in the chat, which might be one
great.
for
Yeah,
you. Maybe you
please.
saw it. does the Blue Voter Guide help with the California propositions that we were just discussing?
Yes, it does. Peggy is leading the team on that, and she has put in a lot of endorsements on ballot measures that we can find that. There are certainly some measures that are either not contested, right? No one's in opposition, nobody is particularly in favor. It's a small bond issue, something like that. So there might not be information for that, but definitely the ones that Peggy presented, as well as numerous other ones across the state of California, have been vetted by her team and the endorsers have been put in.
That's great. Let me see. So I think that we are winding up today's call, unless there's any other questions about the Blue Guide. We had a link up on top to the Blue Voter Guide, also the CalDem endorsements, and another resource as well that's on our own Vote from Abroad, which I have to admit I haven't seen yet. I'm sorry, I see a few questions. Let me see. We'll start with Cuthbert, just because he's been asking a lot of questions, and go to Becky, I think, had a question. So starting with Cuthbert, go ahead.
Okay, just say quickly, with the Blue Voter Guide, the thing is that there's a lot of things that organizations or whoever it is, or groups that try to manipulate the elections. I just want to be clear on who is behind the Blue Voter Guide and who are they?
It started with a gentleman by the name of Wayne Liebman, who lives in Los Angeles and is part of South Cal Blue, a member of Field Team 6, if you've heard of them. They are an organization that is registering Democrats. And he felt that local races, especially the ones that are low information races, needed to help the voter. And so he published on a website an Excel spreadsheet, that showed the progressive candidates, the Democratic candidates, especially in nonpartisan races. And then he thought, well, maybe we should move this to the country. So we did a couple of the swing states the last 2 years, and then we decided to cover all 50 states. So it's definitely a Democratic, we're Blue Voter Guide, definitely a Democratic approach. One of the very few guides that is not nonpartisan and specifically on progressive, forward-thinking organizations. So you can take a look at the list of our orgs on Blue Voter Guide to see the endorsements that we use.
Okay, but just quickly, what if there are multiple candidates, like a primary?
We did that in the
same party?
primary. We did that for the primary. So, which I thought was especially useful in that there might be several Democrats on right in the primary. And so we posted who endorsed them from the endorser's information. We do not take it from the candidate, we take it from the endorser. And we put that and we share that with voters. And we say, here are the endorsements for these candidates.
Okay, so the Blue Voter Guide does not endorse a particular candidate?
No, we are not an endorsing organization. Yeah, we are not an
I just
endorsing.
want to be clear on that then. Okay, good.
Yeah, we don't endorse.
It's a good question. It's another resource as we go and wade through the California ballot for sure. Becky, I think you had a question, and then Peggy after that.
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay. I have to follow up on the gentleman's question. I live in Lake Chapala, Mexico. There's a lot of expats here, both American and Canadian. And I'm also a member, of course, of Democrats Abroad. I want to be able to tell my friends, American anyway, about Blue Voter Guide, but they live in states all over. I have a bunch of friends here that come from California and they're registered to vote. So I will tell them about the Blue Voter Guide. But it's also, I think you answered this, is it also useful for my expat friends here where they vote in states other than California?
Oh yeah, we're covering all 50 states.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, I will broadcast it.
Thank you very much.
All right, sure.
And Peggy, I think had the
Yeah,
final
my
word.
question was answered.
Okay, fantastic. There's a question also, will DA send out information by email on the Blue Voter Guide? We'll send the links to everything on the call today in a follow-up email, so you'll be able to explore all that and the candidates as well. One more question from Brenda? Oh, sorry, different Brenda. Brenda, please go ahead.
Brenda, Becky.
Yes,
Can
apologies.
you hear me?
Yes, that's fine.
Just two little things. One, on Proposition 5, it says that one of the opponents are the California Taxpayers Association, and I thought you had said that they were supporting it.
When you look at all the groups that are like taxpayers, groups, most of them are very far right and most of them are at least Republican. There are some business taxpayer groups that one is called the Middle Class Taxpayer Association, and they promote much more moderate and sensible approaches to government taxation. And so they are in favor of Prop 5. What I was saying, I'm sorry if it was confusing, but the usual crowd of California Taxpayers Association, Republicans for lower taxes, that crowd is opposed to Prop 5 because they believe even the 2/3 requirement that is currently in the law for approving new bond measures at a local level is too low. They feel like no new taxes should ever be imposed on anybody. They are always opposed to any taxes at all.
Thank you.
That was it, if that clarifies it.
And the other thing, I'm really happy that you mentioned this blue voter guide. That's going to be a help because I've been living in France for like 30 years. So when I read these propositions, some of them sound like Chinese to me, and I can't really get my teeth into them. So I was really glad about those 3 you discussed. But for example, 2, 6, 32, 33, and 35, I don't know what they're talking about. And I would like to do it in the Democratic side. So probably this blue voter guide is going to help me with these 5 that I still can't figure out.
I did put the link.
It absolutely will help you.
Good.
I did put the link to Blue Voter Guide in the chat.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Great. Okay, well, if there are no more questions, thank you very much, both Holiday and Peggy, for coming. Really appreciate that. And we'll be hearing from you again at our next event on October 16th. Well, we'll talk about a few more of the propositions, but meanwhile, I encourage you to explore the Blue Voter Guide. And of course, the other thing that you have to do, because you'll be hopefully seeing your ballots this weekend, is getting out the vote. And if you are anywhere in California, particularly if you're in the districts for these 2 candidates, it will make a huge difference if we win all 6 swing districts in California. And these votes may well come from abroad. We love saying, and you may have heard this more than once, the Democrats abroad is the margin of victory. So after you get off this call, if you haven't requested your ballot this year, go to votefromabroad.org. And if you've requested your ballot, as I said, this Saturday is ballot drop day when you should be receiving your ballot or a link to your ballot. So you want to make sure that you've got everything ready to vote. Voter assistance, we'll put some links into that, how you can find that via Democrats Abroad. And then one more thing, and this is sort of something we talk about a lot, this idea of relational organizing. And if you know people in Rudy Salas's district or in Adam Gray's district, talk to them, get them to vote. If they're on the ground, activate your networks who are around there. Maybe be a phone banking volunteer. That is possible for overseas folks. And I also have to put in a plug for donating to Democrats Abroad because a lot of money goes a long way with us. And in districts where margin is as narrow as this could well be, yes, the margin of victory. Thank you, everyone, for coming. Really appreciate your turning out. And please join us for our October 16th event, which Judith has just put into the chat.